New Testaments to the Gospel of John and chapter 15. That's John 15. We'll be continuing in our reading and study of the text this morning. Before we begin, let's take a moment and bow together in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we share in spiritual things. We thank you for the encouragement that is found in Jesus. Help us as disciples to improve our understanding, to open the door to our heart in ways that allow your word to land, reside, and mature within us. Help us to make sure that as we serve you, we do not allow ourselves to grow cold and callous to the needs of humanity that surround us, and forgive us of our sins. We offer this prayer in your Son's name. Amen. All right, so we are in John 15. It includes some really, most likely, familiar statements of Jesus, particularly the extended parable of the vine and the branches, and the way in which Jesus uses that information to teach us about the kingdom in different ways. It's something really interesting in the way in which John presents Jesus. There's less emphasis on the parables, but it's not gone. He uses parables in a different way, the ones that are recorded for us. Where in Luke, Matthew, and Mark, it's more of the mechanism in some ways that creates the structure of the stories. And so in John's account, he gives us one of these extended short stories of a type. A parable is to a certain degree a short story. It's wise for us to pay a little extra attention. That means they're a little more special. There's a few less of them in the gospel account itself. And so when we read through it, especially verses 1 through 11 this morning, again, make sure you're paying attention to it. Firstly, for what it tells us about who Jesus is. Secondly, then, what it then tells us, and Jesus and his explanations that are part of it at times as well, about who kingdom members will look like, think like, behave like, be considered, because that's the next step of it. And then in the larger sense, all the other bits and pieces that any parable that Jesus teaches can provide to us. That method of instruction is intentionally the kind of instruction that requires you to think. It requires you to engage your capacity to reason, to consider. It's part of the nature of humanity that we can do those things, that we can, as a reflection of God's creation, consider, ponder, think about, consider what it means. Here's a quick illustration of it. If I were to begin to quote from this parable, behold, a sower went out to sow. You guys know the rest of the parable roughly in your head? We don't have to quote it, but you know roughly it's this parable of the sower. It's talking about the influence of the gospel. How many of you have ever either raised a garden successfully, defending off the deer, by the way, and the small critters, or worked on a farm? Either A or B. Raise your hands. How many gardeners or farmers are concerned with the cost of seed? Is seed expensive in the farming level? The farming level is a big deal. Gardening, the scale is a little smaller and the cost of seed is a little less important. And so most of us who are in the farm space think about seed in the gardener level. Seed's not a big deal. Very, very inexpensive. But this sower, we imagine as being a farmer, right? And so immediately we start to critique this farmer's work, this sower's work, on the basis of a modern commercial farmer. And I read commentaries from time to time, and they talk about the waste of the seed. What kind of farmer anywhere would take the seed and just toss it everywhere? Well, no modern farmer would ever do that. That's wasteful. Like you're just throwing money on the ground. Remember, these parables have first century context. And the story isn't about getting the story correct. The story is about whatever Jesus wanted us to pull from that. Even ones that seem even more clear, like the vine and the branches, or other ones of a similar kind. We tend to focus on stripping off all of the spiritual content and trying to bring it back to its earthly space. And so when we read this one again, it's a simple story designed to teach complicated truths in a simple way. Let's go ahead and start reading then. Eric is back to 100% from his bout with whatever it was that went through the county recently. And Eric, could you read verses 1 through 11 for us?
I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that does not produce fruit, he removes. And he prunes every branch that produces fruit, so that it will produce more fruit. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me and I in you. Every branch I'm unable to produce fruit by itself, unless it remains in the vine. Neither can you unless you remain in me. I'm the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown aside like a branch, and he withers. They gather them, throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you produce much fruit, and prove me to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you these things so that my joy may be complete in you, and your joy may be complete.
There's a lot in those 11 verses, but they begin with Jesus, in essence, showing a bit of the inside of whom he is, opening his heart, you might say, in another form, telling us who he is in that regard when he says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. And so now we have a relational story being told. He'll go on and explain to a simplified form what's going on in that relationship, the pruning of things. And it's shifting the story just a little bit with each edge of how he lays it out. I'm the true vine, the Father is the vinedresser or the gardener. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it may bear more fruit. Unbeknownst to me, when we moved to Georgia, there are a variety of species of hydrangeas. Some of those hydrangeas you are not supposed to prune. Some of the hydrangeas you are supposed to prune. I did not know this. It was not a thing. How many of you folks knew that before? I know Lyndon. I talked to her about this before. Some of it, like hydrangeas, you prune them, right? That's just what you do. You bring them back down to the ground. They grow up again, flower and everything. If you prune the ones that aren't supposed to be, you're waiting another 2 years before you get flowers again, if you're lucky. And I like the flowers. That's the point of having the bush there. Otherwise, you just got weeds. Like, they don't have pretty flowers. By the way, maybe there's no difference between weeds and flowers. You just don't like the weeds. They got roses too. Same thing with a number of other similar plants. And how you prune them matters. Crepe myrtles. Actually, there's this way you're supposed to prune, and then you commit crepe myrtle, which is basically overly pruning them into these little stubby shrubs, and they never grow into maturity, and they never look like they're supposed to look. And you can like them either way, like your plant, do what you want. But again, pruning is a process, and roses are a big deal. By the way, I should not be in charge of pruning roses at all. I'll prune those thorny critters down to the ground and let someone else handle that business. So pruning then is part of the production process that will determine whether or not you get the outcome you desire. If you like the flowers, follow the process as directed by our understanding of the plants. If you just want green shrubby things in your yard with no flowers ever and you got hydrangeas up there, chop them down every year. Especially if you have the species, the variety that we have at our house. They won't flower if you cut them down. That context then helps me kind of get a bit of what Jesus is starting to lay out here. But remember, he's using plants to tell us about people. Because very quickly, we can catch that when he's saying, I am the vine, we have to ask the question, is God, the vine dresser, the gardener, pruning Jesus or something else? And are we talking about plants again or people? So let me get one more step. How many of you are really excited for pruning season in your life? Either physically or emotionally and spiritually. You guys like pruning plants? You guys want to be pruned? I'd rather not. I mean, I could think about various ways in which my life has been adjusted by experiences or by my recognition of what God is accomplishing. And almost always, it's a little unpleasant. I don't like change. I'm still complaining 25 to 30 years later because Chili's changed its menu and took away the one item that I loved at Chili's. And it's not even special or spectacular, but they took it from me. They didn't even check my opinion, right? I'm sure a lot of us probably have a similar, feeling about parts of this. And as he is shifting the picture from plants to people, the image shifts some, and the term prune there literally means cleanses or cleans. Like you prune out a plant, all the extra stuff goes out. So if you're clearing out a tree that's been naturally grown and you want it to look a little more manicured, you're going to V it up around the drip ring, and you're going to take all those dead branches from the inside to open it up so that the sunlight, the oxygen, everything can then get down to either the ground underneath or more healthily to the plant up above. That's us. Les?
There's another comparison to me also that, like grapevines, when you prune them, you don't prune the main vine, you prune all the growth that comes. The main vine is where all the nourishment comes from.
Yep.
And that's what Christ is to us, that's where our nourishment comes from. But then the little branches that come off of that, whether they produce or not, determine whether they stay.
Yeah, and we can like incrementally see this image that's going from plant, grapevine, olive tree, all of them get pruned the same way. If you have impacted limbs on your fruit-bearing tree where the limbs are really rubbing against each other because they grew weird, one of them has to go. Otherwise, they'll both go. And so the gardener will come in and prune off whichever one they determine is the most structurally compromised so that the other one can grow in a more healthy way. That's going into this image. That again, shifting from plant to people group-wise, but the most specific thing is the deliberate aspect of God coming in and working through us individually, communally, so that growth takes place. That means sometimes you and I need to be pruned. We need to have that clearing space. And remember, the term there is cleansed in its base meaning. That means there's going to be some things that need to be pulled out so that the full set of nutrients can be received. And so Jesus is providing those nutrients to us, is giving us that sustenance. If we got parts of our lives that are out of order, dosed off, maybe they are engaged in improper behavior, ungodly behavior, they're dipping in the waters of rebellion, need to be pruned off so we can grow healthily, grow fully. And that's that image kind of coming to the full picture there. And he starts with pruning, and then he'll talk about this a couple different ways. He closes with, in essence, this is done out of love. Pruning is a result of love. And you can think about love in this context, and the words partly support this, in care. What does an abandoned property look like? What are some of the words that mean, like an abandoned house? You go down the neighborhood, house, house, house. This one's abandoned, house, house, house. What are the indicators?
The vegetation overtakes it.
Overgrown. What's the house exterior look like? Not taken care of. Nobody cares about it. Well, nobody. Who owns that property? Who's got the title? Almost the bank must have taken it. Oh, the family inherited it and they didn't take care of it. It's an indication of how we're seeing it. And so if you take it over or you come back to restore it, you got to prune. You got to restore everything so that things can grow in the right way, in a healthy way. That's, again, part of this image, and it has in part to do with the kind of love that cares about whatever it is. You care about the garden. In this case, God cares about us who are in the garden, supported by the true vine as the tendrils, the roots, the branches that extend off of it. Different words are employed there in different translations that all roughly mean the same thing. That it's the part that comes off the main. Les, did you have one more?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that overgrowth. If you don't prune it back, then the good growth that you want can't survive. So if our lives are full of bad things and we don't get rid of them, then we're not going to survive spiritually.
Yeah, and this has to kind of push us to the application side too. It's one thing to go, okay, now I get what Jesus is talking about. I know that it means that God is providing to me and feeding me. But now, how does that actually manifest? What does it look like? Like what kind of indicators? And one of the questions I came up with is, how does, or what does it mean practically and spiritually in this context to remain in Jesus? What does that then look like? Here's the first thing. Here's my easy level first answer to that. Showing up at church. And do not discount that one as being difficult. It's super easy for the preacher to show up at church, right? But on the same level, do I have a life exterior of the church building? How difficult is it to get yourself out of bed on a morning when your body's not in compliance with your heart? Like, it's a lot. Every part of me creaks at this point in life when I wake up. You can hear the whole, like, every bone makes its own little special noise. Okay, so that's physically, but emotionally. How much weight are you carrying personally? How much difficulty exists in your own life that makes the determination that I'm going to be here a challenge? A lot. So if that's our step one, I think it's a fair step one. I'm going to show up to be with my brethren. Is there stuff before that too? Outside of the go to church level? Absolutely. 100%. They also may be even more difficult, more challenging, more important than making sure you made it to services that day. How do you treat the people around you? Kindness. Is there a similarity in your behavior to everybody in that Christ is part of your character when you treat a problem in front of you a different way? You ascribe your full self to the solution of that. Going to church may be hard, but it also can be equally hard or more difficult to behave Christ-like the other 6 days of the week. And we can see the other 160 hours of the week if we scrap travel time and assembled worship time off the table.
It may be more difficult because when you're at church, you're around people that are more like you are. When you're at work around the world, you're around people that are not like you are. So that makes it even more difficult to live the kind of life that you need to live.
Yeah, and that's a new set of challenges. The things that your life is going to be full of people who are on a full spectrum of spiritual development. Simply because a person is not a church-going person doesn't mean that they're the bad influence. Bad influence could be another church-going person, loosely used, who has a heart that's broken. It's fundamentally flawed spiritually because it hasn't really sought full transformation. It could be dealing with a populace of people around you that they are really suffering, and the emotional weight of their sorrow tears at the nature of your being. Like, we feel bad for them at such level that it's just crushing. All of those things fit into this. This can be harder. And then when you come with your brethren, you got a group of people who are trying. Here's a pro tip. Never assume that the church you attend doesn't have any hypocrites. Sometimes you're the hypocrite, sometimes I'm the hypocrite, because that's just how this works. But they're trying. That's the next level, but they're still trying. They're play acting while they figure it out. Hopefully they work it out. But again, now you're with people who are trying. That's part of this thing of like, okay, what does it mean to remain in Jesus? It's commitment at the fullest level and investing in something so that you care about it. Jesus is also investing in us in this equal component. Think deep back into your past when it felt like you were being, for lack of any other useful example, pruned. When things are getting kind of shifted around in your life. In that context, whatever you thought, did you really feel like there was a loving hand doing the pruning? Listen, there's not one part of pruning that on the receiving end that feels like, oh, that's good. I really like it when things got really hard. But I can now reflect and say, you know what? That was really good for me. That was really good for my family. It was great for my faith, even though it was really awful.
Yeah, but it can be difficult, but I never did believe the part where my dad would tell me this is going to hurt me as much as it did you.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
I said, well, just don't do it. We want you to want to be hurt.
Yeah, that's probably when Dad goes outside, laughs, comes back in, does it a second time. Or some variation of that outcome. I think there's a lot of those things that we don't perceive clearly until we have a little more road down the miles. Like we've gone a little bit, look back and we see it, and we're like, okay, yeah, I can see some value to it. I can understand why this occurred. I may not know the source for it. I may not be able to differentiate, is this happenstance that I've just learned from my experiences? Is there a edge of this that God is doing, molding the universe? Because I know He can do it. And the mystery is always part of the equation. And so you got to think about that too. Cecilia?
I was going to say, it's Les's illustration of the father, it hurts me more than it hurts you. That just brought to mind that being a pruner is no fun either. It's not as fun, it's not fun to be the pruner or the prunee.
Yeah. Across the board, in all contexts, the kind of leadership that requires constructive criticism or discipline or even restriction and punishment is difficult. And all the other edges of it. And anyone who cares feels the weight of that. Those who don't care are performative in some way, and they're just doing what they need to do to get by through the day. This last reflection here, I think, is the most valuable one for me. It's just simply saying, okay, I want to produce fruit, spiritual fruit in my life, the desire that I have. Knowing what that is also helps me identify what I need to do to make it happen on my end of the table. Because it's always a mutual equation. If I desire to produce fruit of any kind spiritually, if we're talking about the picture of fruit that Paul uses, or any outcome, I got to do the thing that makes that be the outcome. But the first step is figuring out whatever it is I long for, whatever I actually want. and then making sure that I actually move in a way that makes that be the outcome. If you want to become more invested in people, then you've got to spend time with the people. If you want to see your understanding of the Bible increase, the first thing you got to do is the easiest one on the table. Read and or listen to the Bible. Because you can listen to it in the car, or you can read it yourself. Both accumulate the same outcome, right? So you can incrementally see, okay, I want to be a better parent. That was an early question for me as a young dad. And especially I said to myself, I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to develop real faith in my children. How do I accomplish that? That was a question, right? I realized very quickly that there's a component of that I can't control. Each individual child has a full box of self-will from day one. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but I could at least go out and talk to parents and grandparents who had raised kids who are still trying to be faithful. Say, what'd you do? Why'd you do it? And I get to then make my own self-will choice and say, I'm going to do that thing over there, this thing over there, and 2 of those things over there. And we're going to see what happens. That's literally how it always plays out. So you can take any level of other things in your life and ask those same questions and say, well, I want to be a servant in the church one day. I want to serve as an elder. I want to be a deacon. I want to be a Bible class teacher. I want to be more supportive to my brethren. All of those are fruit that come out of your relationship to Christ. And you get to pick and prune self and allow to be pruned on the other end, how that happens. Les, do you have one more thing there?
I was just trying to think where that scripture is. It lists what's called the fruits of the Spirit, which is kind of life that you live, and I can't come across it right now.
Yeah, it's in Galatians. It's all right. There's a song for it too. Maybe we'll sing it later. We'll sing the Fruits of the Spirit song this month at our Wednesday singing. We think it's a kid's song, but now I'm going to add it to my list because it's one I can sing. I can lead. It's okay. No one else gets to steal that song from me. My repertoire of songs is pretty low. So that one's going on my list. Next part of the text. This picks up in chapter 15, verse 12, and it continues what's going on there. Trenton, do you want to read for us back there? Just verses 12 through 17.
This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another.
And there's a neat interconnection. I didn't highlight it in the last section, but you notice in the closing parts of verses 1 through 11, the outcome of the shriveled, dead branches as they're tossed into the fire. It moves forward in this imagery to talking about the impact of the commitment of God in a way that emphasizes our love. It says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And so from the one end, you have these unfaithful branches, unfruitful branches that are pruned off because they didn't root themselves into the love of God and show it that way. As such, they're cast off, they're tossed into the fire. And then on the other end, the admonition is you need to love like the gardener loves, like the vine loves. The gardener loves by pruning, the Vinedresser. The vine loves by emanating support. Jesus' love for us then is structural. It is full of all of the I am nutrients. I am the door, I am the way, I am the life, I am the water that gives life. Like that whole picture of he's going to give. And as he gives, everything around him blooms. Everything around him grows. Trent?
Well, yeah, I also want to say, that last section there, is when we go through that change, we talk about hindsight. You look back at it and the result was good. I like that he's telling us beforehand that the result of God's pruning is joy, so that joy may be full in him. He's telling us beforehand that the result is good as you're going through that.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those things that we can say it right now, but we don't always have the capacity to articulate it when we're in the pruning box. When they put us up on the shelf and the gardener starts saying the bonsai tree is going to reveal to me what it actually is. And they start clipping all the little corners and edges off of it. And it's beautiful. It's kind of how a sculptor works too. They see a block of stone and they take away everything that isn't the thing they envision or imagine. And that's happening with us. That's being empowered by God. And if we choose to ignore what God provides to us, then we atrophy. We don't grow. We don't mature. And then it brings us to this, connection here that this real sense of discipleship is going to be marked by how we are willing to broadly sacrifice for others, to give up in order to gain. And that's contrary not to just core American values, not to 21st century values. It's contrary to how the world generally functions. The world generally functions me first. Period. From post-garden till return to God, me first. So the minute you begin to start thinking about anybody else than yourself, you are encapsulating a bit of what it means to be a Christian. Especially when you do so when you don't have to. You can legally make someone do something and they will not like it at all. But when someone does so willingly, you've now moved to a whole different area. And that's part of this picture here, that willingly, I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to give, I'm willing to share. So in practical terms then, given Jesus' illustration of laying down his life in the most literal sense there, what are some times in life where we have to start to rise that level of sacrificial love? And for our purposes here, you cannot use human conflict. So you can't say war. That's a given in the idiom.
It's no longer you, your spouse. You have little ones depending on you, so you put your wants, your needs to the rear to make sure that your children are nourished physically as well as spiritually.
And the world pulls on that edge too. One of the classic things that parents struggle with is if you have someone come to you and say, hey, if you buy my system, your child will have an educational advantage over every other child. And the system could be pick your box. Back in the day, it was buy our encyclopedias. If you have encyclopedias in your house, then your children will know more than the other children know. Well, only if they read and remember the things that are in there. And if your child's 2, by the time they start to read it, the information is dated. Like it's out of date. Doesn't mean a bunch of parents didn't go out and buy encyclopedias and sign the dotted line for the encyclopedia sets that were sold house to house for a long time. We all do that. And so the world pulls on this natural feeling of, I got to make sure my kids. And then we struggle with priorities in that same space. Right? Okay, so I want my kids to receive this sacrificial attention and care. And so we prioritize maybe some things that don't actually matter. How many kids make it from athletic fields as little T-ballers to becoming the very best baseball player on the planet? Well, only one does it every once in a while, so the ratio is pretty low. But if you moderate your priorities, it's like T-ball's fun. We do T-ball because it's fun. And if you excel at it, you'll excel at it. And if you work hard at anything, you'll get better at it. But if you make it the goal when they're 2 to be a professional baseballer when they're 20, maybe your priorities, because you don't know. You don't know it 2. You don't even really know it 10. And mostly you don't know because you can't control injuries, developmental growth, physical acuity. You just can't. Even genetics don't always tell the tale. Even kids who are descendants of former nationally renowned players in a particular sport, they don't just keep having generational ones as the norm. It's exceptional. So the odds are, every kid playing T-ball today probably should just have a good time. Parents do. Same thing with academics, same thing with most things. But there is a limit, right? Where sacrifice now moving into spiritual space makes more sense. So investing in spiritual things might need to go up higher in the equation. So there's an area. Another area might be caring for the congregation itself. Is there any glory in serving as an elder or a deacon? Let me put it this way. Should there be any glory in serving as an elder or a deacon? But have you met people who, in that role, feel like the title matters? Like if you get an email from someone and it closes off with elder so-and-so, there better be a reason. You better be signing some paperwork that requires you to identify your title. Because generally speaking, those roles are actually servant roles to serve others. And there's not really a whole lot of gain from it. It was explained to me years ago, and to which I still contain this basic explanation. Serving as an elder is pretty much a never-ending series of uncomfortable conversations. Someone's uncomfortable in every conversation, period. And it's okay, because the service is designed to help go from uncomfortable to comfortable. That is how it is. Same thing is true for those who serve in any capacity in any entity anywhere. They are giving of themselves to another, not for themselves, but for the others. Family, you got a member in the hospital, family member in the hospital, you're going to find a way to serve. Maybe it's bring them food. Maybe it's just go sit there and be present. Maybe it's go make sure the lawn gets mowed because they can't mow it. Maybe it's just be there at the house, make sure everything's safe. Feed the dogs, whatever it is. These are all marginal sacrifices of the same equitable unit we all share, time. It's the one unifying thing. That time you have is the same time anybody else has while they're living. And so when you give it, you're given a fraction of your time, at whatever context that plays out to. The text closes out from that picture of covenantal committed love with this last section. This is verses 18 through 27. Let's see. Bill, do you want to read that for us? This is John 15, 18 through 27, whole long patch.
If the world hates you, know that he has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they keep my word, they will also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who has sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. But now they have seen and have hated both me and my Father. But the word that is written in their law must be filled. They hated me without cause. But when the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth which proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning.
There's a lot that goes on here that fits our space of who is Jesus. Because you'll know, and I thought about this a lot, I was trying to figure out how to think through this text, and there's two corners of it. That's the first bell, right, Les? Okay. The first corner we tend to really identify with, in that if I preach the gospel or tell someone what Jesus said or did, sometimes they don't like it. And sometimes when they don't like it, they really don't like it. And sometimes when they don't like it, they really don't like it to the point that they hate me. That's a corner of this. But there's this other corner that is in context here that I was thinking a whole lot about. And he says, if they hate you, it's because of what I did. Not because of what you did, but because of what I did. If they hate you, it's because they didn't know me, but they saw the works that I did. There's a certain component of being a Christian where you're going to be enduring suffering because of the nature and person of whom Jesus is. That's going to become identifiable in context here when you start not speaking like a Christian, but acting like one. When your behavior gets kind, compassionate, equivalent to the works of Jesus. If you go out and help somebody, there's going to be people who hate you for it. Why'd you go help them? They don't hate you. They hate the idea of Christianity. The concept of whatever it is that whom God is. And in context there's a whole lot of, they saw the works that I did, and it's on them because they didn't believe. That's a little bit harder to swallow in some ways because it's a little bit more difficult to put my finger on the problem. If I do something stupid and someone doesn't like my stupid, I know exactly who to blame, right? Who do I blame? Me. I blame me for what I did. I know why they're upset. I know that they're angry because I behaved in a way that made them angry. Get it? But when I go out and I am compassionate and kind, I show up to care for someone, I make myself available. And the world, generally, or an individual human being who is behaving like the world, is now upset with me because I'm doing a thing that Jesus himself would do. That's harder. Because you know you're doing the right thing, right? And you look at it and go, why would you be bothered by me giving this person food? Why would you be bothered by me sacrificing time or life to care for this person who's a mess, who's got problems, who's troubled, who's angry? Why are you bothered by it? Are you bothered at me? No. Contextually, they're bothered at the person of Christ, the message of Jesus. I'll tell you, that's harder for me to internalize and conceptualize, because we're now at an edge where it's less about what I've done and now more about what God is doing. And it exposes their sin in a different way. And it's not sin in the direct abject sense of they did a thing that God called sin and not to do. It's they don't believe that Jesus is the Christ in context. They don't accept the evidence. That's a harder thing to deal with. And that's actually part, I think, what the core primary part of this text is about, is that nature of whom Jesus is. Because the atmosphere of the text has kind of been pushing that way. Following Christ then will mean to share in his suffering, being hated by a world, empowered by evil forces to simply hate us on the very basis of our connection to the true vine. That they want to poison every ounce of that. And you could just be sitting there at home, just existing. And this is what takes place. Clock says it's time. Les is going to say it's time, so we have to stop right here. But that will stage us to